it is with great pleasure that I introduce my friend, Adam Leipzig.
May I tell you a story? When he was 25 years old, a young Frenchman biology student who'd never held a camera before, named Luc Jacquet, got the opportunity of his lifetime. He was asked by his mentor, a senior biologist, to come halfway around the world to Antarctica because the senior biologist said, I need someone to hold the camera and help me out. So Luc went, and he took that terrible trip on the oceans where the seas are rocky and everybody gets sick, and he got to the French Antarctica base, slept over the night. Early in the morning, his mentor said, wake up early, come on, let's get up, we have to get up before the sun comes up. And he said, come stand right here and point your camera there, over the horizon. So Luc did. He had a really long lens on this camera. He set it up on a tripod. He waited and waited. And then eventually he saw these tiny little black specks. And as the specks came into focus, he realized, whoa, those are penguins. Now, at that moment, Luc had an epiphany. He had a life-changing moment. He decided that he was going to make a feature film about penguins, these creatures that were still a couple of miles away across the horizon, but he decided he was going to make a feature film about them. And when you talk to Luc today, he doesn't even know why he had that epiphany, why that lightning bolt struck him, but it did. He'd never made a film, he just decided he was going to do it. It took him 12 years. 12 years later, Luc and 2 other French cameramen found themselves back in Antarctica shooting penguins on film. Now, at that point, I was the president of National Geographic Films. And when you're the president of National Geographic Films, you hear about the strangest things. You hear about wildlife photographers who are in the bush in Africa, and they call you on their satellite phone and they say, Adam, it's so exciting. I got a picture of the lion doing I said, really, Derek, that was so exciting. Why was that? He said, well, I had a picture of the lion going from right to left, but now I have the picture of the lion going from left to right, and I can cut it into the scene, and the scene will be beautiful. Congratulations, Derek, I'm so happy. How long did you wait in the bush to get that shot? Well, I waited 3 months, but it was really worth it. So when you're the president of National Geographic Films, you hear about these amazing, crazy wildlife photographers who go around the world doing things like this, and you hear about 3 crazy Frenchmen who have wintered over in Antarctica for 13 months. And you decide that if you're running National Geographic Films, you better have that movie, because if you don't have it, you're not really running National Geographic Films. Now, at that point, they were shooting on actual film. They weren't shooting digitally, because physical film holds up really well in the cold, awful weather conditions of Antarctica. And they were shipping the film back to a lab in Paris. So I sent an editor to the lab in Paris and asked him to look at the footage. He called me and said, it's in focus. I said, well, that should be good enough for us, because if it's focus, we can somehow turn that into the movie that we want it to be. At that point, I called the agent who was representing these filmmakers. And I said, Carol, we're National Geographic Films. We would like to buy this film and release it in the United States. And she said, well, you know, Adam, if you had called me yesterday, I would have sold it to you. But this morning, we found out that we just got into Sundance. And we think we're going to sell it for a whole lot more money at Sundance. So we're going to wait. I'll see you in Park City in January. So at that point, there was nothing except to say, game on. We're going to see them in Park City in January. At this moment, National Geographic Films was still a nascent company. We didn't have the thing that most movie companies need to have, which is a distribution mechanism. The people, the department that actually take the film and get it into the cinemas near you so you, the audience, could come and watch the movie. And because we didn't have a distribution department and we didn't have enough time to create one ourselves, we had to make a partnership. So over the next month, I called the people at Fox, at Warner Brothers, at Universal, at Roadside Attractions, at Paramount, and I said, look, we're going to go to Sundance. We're going to buy this movie, this kind of crazy movie about penguins. It's a documentary. Nobody's seen it yet, but I think it's going to be great. And we need a distribution partner. Let's make a deal. And I negotiated 5 distribution deals with each of these distributors where they said, if you like the movie and we like the movie, we'll agree to this deal. So we had pre-negotiated deals, and we were all ready to go to Sundance. Have anybody been to the Sundance Film Festival? Okay, well, the Sundance Film Festival takes place in January in Park City, Utah. It's a big festival, biggest independent film festival in the United States. It's really the epicenter of the independent film movement. It's full of filmmakers and audiences and fans and critics and people who finance movies, people who distribute movies. On the second day of Sundance in that year, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, in the Eccles Auditorium, which is a 1,200-seat auditorium, was the first screening of the film that at that point was called La Marche de l'Empereur, that we would later call March of the Penguins. No one had seen the movie yet. The theater filled up. Luc Jacquet, the filmmaker, welcomed the audience. The audience gave him applause. And here we are, okay? So now you're sitting here in the theater. You're running National Geographic Films. And over here, you have the people at Warner Brothers and Universal and Paramount. And over here are the people at Fox and Roadside Attractions. So we're all sitting in a row. Your potential distribution partners, they're kind of looking at each other because they know they're in competition with each other. You're sitting here in the middle. You're praying the movie is really good. You sit there. The curtain opens. The Antarctic wind begins to blow. And I'm going to come back and finish that story in a second. Because why do movies matter so much? Why do movies captivate us so? Well, movies aren't life, but they're kind of like the way we want life to be. And as a work process, they're a metaphor for life, and they're a metaphor for business, because movies are all about collaboration. No movie is made alone. No movie is made by one person. Movies are only made by teams, huge teams, teams that can be the size of the number of people that are in this room right now. Movies are about story. We go because they tell us stories that we need to hear, and they're about how we practice the narrative of our lives, because in some ways we learn to live the narrative of our lives by the characters' narratives in the movies that we see. They're about holding a vision. Every single movie started with nothing, with an idea in one person's brain and heart that then was somehow transformed and communicated and accreted other collaborators until it turns into a vision that's visible on a screen that 1 billion people around the world can see. How does that happen? And how does the filmmaking process of collaboration and being outward-facing towards your audience, what's the science of that you can apply into your business every day? Filmmaking is all about holding a vision. When I was at National Geographic, I had the privilege to meet a cultural ethnographer whose name is Elizabeth Capuolani Lindsay. And as you can tell by her middle name, Elizabeth grew up in the Hawaiian Islands. She's Hawaiian by descent. As she grew up, she had a lot of affinity with her elders in her family and her extended family. And she became a PhD in ethno-cultural biology. And she decided that she wanted to ask herself a question. How did the Micronesian navigators, tens of thousands of years ago, with no science particularly that we know, how did they navigate from island to island on those seas? She went to Micronesia and she found some of the last living elders. She gained their trust and learned their story. I'm going to share it with you right now. The elders told her that they didn't look at the horizon, they looked past the horizon. They sighted beyond the horizon to where the island was supposed to be. They placed themselves at the prow of the ship, they closed their eyes, and they began to sing. And in their minds, in their imagination, their song called the island to the ship. In their imagination, the ship was stationary. The island was moving. And after days at sea, after singing the song over and over, they would open their eyes and there the island would be before them. It's very powerful to sight over the horizon. What Curtis was just talking about was sighting past the horizon, because you know something? You have the capacity to sight past the horizon, and only seeing to the horizon is not a big deal. Any civilian can see to the horizon. On the flat at Arctic wasteland, the horizon is only 3 miles away. It's no big deal to get to the horizon. You can walk or swim to the horizon in an hour. But to sight past the horizon, to sight to a vision of something that nobody else can see, well, that's what great companies do. And in fact, that's also what filmmakers do. And what filmmakers do is what I would think of as the persistence of excellence. Before I got into the movie business, I had the privilege to work with Robert Altman, the great director who directed McCabe and Mrs. Miller and The Player and Three Women and LA Stories, Shortcut, 25 amazing movies that really formed the American cinema. And Robert wanted to direct a play for the first time. I was privileged to be the producer of the first time Bob decided to direct in a theater. So in this play, we had a stage effect, which was we had to have a life-size dummy that looked like one of the actors. And because I was producing the play, and theaters are small, and everybody does everything, I was not only producing the play, but I was also supervising the prop shop and trying to make sure everything was right. So on the day that I wanted to show Bob this dummy, we dragged it up the stairs into the lobby, and we laid it down on the floor. We called Bob out of rehearsal, and he came out of rehearsal, sort of surrounded by a haze of smoke from some mysterious substance that was always surrounding Bob. And he looked it up, and he looked down. He just looked at me, and he said, "That's adequate." And then he turned around and he walked back in. I was shattered, because you don't want to be adequate for Bob Altman. You want to be excellent. You want to be extraordinary. So we took that dummy down and we fixed it. We fixed the wig. We fixed the shoes. We brought it back up the next day. Bob comes out of rehearsal, looks it up, looks it down, he looks at me again. He says, "That's adequate." Goes back into rehearsal. I'm now completely mortified. What are we going to do? But I look at it again and I say, yeah, it really could be better. We could age it down. We could make a tear in the jeans where the actors' costumes jeans have a tear. We could make everything a little bit better. Do it again the next day. Drag it up the stairs, lay it down on the ground. Bob comes out, looks it up, looks it down. He looks at me. He says, "That's adequate, but you could stop working on it now." He goes back into rehearsal. So later, I talked to some people who had made a lot of movies with Bob, and they said the highest praise Bob ever gives anybody is, "That's adequate." And he says that because if he said it was adequate, he would always force people to strive for better. He would always drive people to greater levels of excellence. When I was at Disney, I learned something about striving for excellence and persistence and taking risks from one of my mentors, Jeffrey Katzenberg, who's a legendary studio executive who now runs DreamWorks Animation. We made a movie called Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and it opened day and date with a Batman movie. We thought we were going to get crushed, but we didn't get crushed. In fact, it was a gigantic hit. And we came in on Monday morning at 7:45 in the morning to the staff meeting, high fives all around, big hugs. Everybody was so excited. And Jeffrey comes into the staff meeting, sits down at the head of a table with 40 people around it, looks around the room, sees everybody very happy, and he looks and says, "Next." No high fives, no pats on the head, no bonuses, nope, just next. And we moved on with our business. But then I really learned the genius of next about 6 months later when we made another movie that didn't work at all. It was dead on arrival at the theater. There were like 2 people in every cinema in America that bothered to go see this movie. It was an unmitigated failure. And that morning on Monday at 7:45 in the morning, we came into the staff room and there were 40 very, very sad faces and we had nothing to say. And Jeffrey walked into the staff room and he sat down at the head of the table and he looked around the room and he said, "Next?" Because we have ups and we have downs and you always have to move on. You have to persist. And you have to take the risks. We only learn from our failure. We only learn from our risks. We only learn from the risks we take. And if you're not taking a risk, you're not playing the game. We got to be in the game. We got to take the game on. It's also about persistence. I'm sure that many of you saw the movie Gravity, directed by Alfonso Cuarón, but you didn't see it with Robert Downey Jr. and Natalie Portman. You saw it with Sandra Bullock and George Clooney. So you didn't see it with Natalie and Robert Downey Jr. because they were originally going to be in it, but that version of the movie didn't work out. And in fact, Universal Studios was supposed to make the movie, but they lost confidence in it, and that version didn't work out. And Alfonso and his collaborating team had to wait for 5 years to get that movie made. They had to wait until Universal got rid of the movie, what we call putting it into turnaround, getting rid of it, saying, here, you can have it back, just pay us back all the money we invested. He had to go to Warner Brothers Studios and convince them to adopt the movie that Universal had cast off as uncommercial and get Warner's to take it. And then, as Warner's was about to make the movie, they had to follow their business model, which is they always like to have a financial partner to share the financial risk. And up until moments before the film went into production, Warner's couldn't find a financial partner. They couldn't find anybody to share the risk. The film was teetering on the brink. How did Alfonso Cuarón convince Warner Brothers to break their financial model, to take the risk, to break the mold, to get out of their box? He just told them the story. He recrafted the narrative. But when we do these things, when we work on films, it's not about ourselves. It's not about our egos, despite what you might see on TMZ and in E! Entertainment magazine. It's really about you. It's really about the audience. And we have a lot of science behind how we make our movies, how we make our movies work, because our movies are designed to be outward-facing. They're designed to give the audience exactly what they want, because we really believe that the audience is always right. And if we're not giving the audience the level of entertainment, joy, satisfaction, romance, dream, and poetry that you've paid your hard-earned money for, well, we haven't done our job. We do that by a series of iterations of the film that we share with our audiences. We do things that are called test screenings. We do preview screenings of our movies where we'll recruit a bunch of people in a theater in different cities around America, sometimes in San Francisco or Los Angeles or in New York or Minnesota or Chicago. We'll recruit audiences, we'll fill the theater with 200, 300, 400 people, show them the movie, and then ask them what they thought. And then we go back to the editing room and we recut the movie. We fix it in response to the audience's reaction, then we do it again. We do it again. We do it again. For a major studio film, it would be common to do this 20 times. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of assets. It's a lot of capital that we're putting towards that. We do it 20 times because we're trying to perfect it, because we know that it's our job to be outward-facing and generous and loving and giving to these people who support us and who enter into this dark, magical place where we can dream together. Christopher Nolan, who directed Inception, who had the bravery to end a movie with a spinning top, you didn't know if it was going to fall to the right or the left or keep spinning, who directed the Batman movies, he doesn't listen to studio executives, but he listens to his audience. When he previewed The Dark Knight Rises, the most recent Batman movie, the audience, and Chris thought it was perfect, by the way, the audience told him, we don't understand what that character Bane, the bad guy, we can't understand his words. Chris went back to the sound mixing stage and fixed the way it sounds so you could understand what that character said. Jim Cameron, who is a famous, fabulous, iconoclastic director who directed Avatar, who makes studio executives quake in their boots, who will not let them onto the set, who gives them no quarter, he doesn't listen to the studio executives, but he listens to his audience. And when he was making Titanic, he showed it successively to his audience. And the version that he showed to his audience for Titanic was too long. You may have thought it was too long now, but it was. But the version he showed his audience was 45 minutes longer. He listened to his audience. He cut 45 minutes out of the movie. And then it went to gross $1 billion. So I think that that was a pretty good decision. So continually, we use the science to hear our audience. We listen with really big ears because we need to hear what people are saying. In the same way that everything that you do, which is outward facing, where you listen iteratively to your audience, to your clients, to your customers, allows you to shape and reshape your services, allows you to shape and reshape the narrative of your company as you change and grow over the next several years. Because it's always about sighting past the horizon and figuring out where that wants to be that you're going to navigate to. Let's go back to that Sundance theater. Can we go back there? Okay, so we're in the Eccles Auditorium, and you're running National Geographic Films. And you're sitting here in the 5th row, and you've got distributors to the right of you and distributors to the left of you, and they're looking sidelong at each other because they're competitors. And you've made deals with all of them, but only if they like the movie. And nobody's seen the movie yet. And it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon on the second day of Sundance. Luc Jacquet has just come down off the stage. The red curtains open. The movie begins, and you see the vast Antarctic wasteland. You watch the snow sweeping across with the wind blowing on this driest, coldest, most inhospitable place on Earth. Now you hear music, repetitive disco music, Euro, techno pop, dance music, and you're thinking, well, that's a choice. If I were a composer, I probably wouldn't have put Euro, techno pop, dance music against Antarctic ice fields, but fine, maybe that's what they decided to do. But you're listening to it, and the distributors are kind of looking at you slightly strangely, but they're riding with it, because you can always change the score. And then, far in the distance, these penguins begin to waddle into frame, and they come very close to the frame, and one penguin looks at another penguin and says, "Bonjour, chérie." And the other penguin looks back and says, "Ah, bonjour, on attend les autres." Hi, we're waiting for everybody else. And now the penguins keep talking, and you learn a couple of things. First, that penguins are telepathic. Second, that penguins speak French. Third, that the filmmakers made a really strange choice to have a movie about talking telepathic penguins. The whole movie is talking telepathic penguins. Halfway through the film, there's an egg that hatches, and there's a little baby penguin that comes out. And the little baby penguin looks up and says, "Bonjour, mama. Bonjour, papa." The film's over. You go out into the lobby, and you kind of go into a corner. And now the distributors that you've made pretty aggressive deals with come towards you, and they look at you like, really? What were you thinking? Why are we here? Why did you ask us to sit through that movie? And you say, well, the film is amazing. What you see is great. Everything that you hear can change because it's still plastic, because there's something beyond the horizon that we can get to. And the distributors fall away, except one brave distributor, my brother in this, Mark Gill at Warner Brothers, Warner Independent, a company that sadly is no longer in existence. He shared the vision of what could be beyond the horizon. In the next 90 days, we hired a brilliant writer to write a poetic script. We hired an extraordinary composer to write a beautiful symphonic score. Jordan Roberts' poetic script was spoken by Morgan Freeman. In fact, Mark and I were on the phone together, and he said, "I have a great idea for who should do the narration." I said, "I have a better idea for who should do the narration." We said, "Let's say it together," and we both at the same time said, "Morgan Freeman." So we changed everything that you hear about the movie. And when that movie opened, we opened it in 2 theaters, one in Los Angeles, one in New York, and the theater was full. It was full of people who were grandparents. And then 2 weeks later, they brought their grandkids because they discovered it was a movie that they could share with their grandchildren. And 2 weeks later, those kids brought their parents because they realized it was a movie that they could share with their parents. And 2 weeks later, teenagers started coming because they realized it was so romantic. It's a date movie. And it became the most successful nature film of all time, the second highest grossing documentary of all time. It won an Academy Award. It won awards around the world. But if you had asked us the night before it opened if we knew it was going to be a hit, we would have said, we have no clue. We don't really know. We won't know until the audience comes and we see if people really buy the tickets. Because we're always in a situation of taking risks and of not knowing. Doubt is one of the big things that can kill change in a company. There are two. The other big thing are silos. Every company that I've ever worked in, every company I've ever consulted with, has silos. Now, silos come up often for the best reasons, because someone has core expertise, or because companies grow by adopting other companies and building divisions. And sometimes silos come up for not the right reasons, because people have ego attachment to what they do, and they say, get away, this is what I do, stay away from here. I'm sure that you have silos in your company, because every company does. And silos become the DNA of companies. We feel as though DNA is immutable, that our heredity is our destiny. You are really right to be thinking right now, can we ever change? Can we ever get past the silos? This is where science comes back and helps us out, because science now has shown us that DNA expresses itself differently in response to environmental conditions. Just because it's in the genes doesn't mean it has to be said. Just because you know it here doesn't mean it has to come out of your mouth. And just because you've always done it one way doesn't mean you always have to do it that way. The way to pierce through silos, like that bow and arrow in the Hunger Games, just going straight through something, the way to pierce through silos is by storytelling. In a company, the environmental factors that change the way DNA is expressed is story. It's narrative. Today, you've already begun to recraft your story, to reshape BPM's corporate narrative. Already among you, new leaders are emerging. Your new leaders, the next generation of leadership, will become the storytellers in chief. You will be the people who tell the new story, the newly crafted story, beautifully, articulately, passionately, and always, if you're leaders, outward-facing. You'll use the word we instead of I. You'll always be pointed outwards to your team and to your customers, to the people whom you serve. And leadership in today's world really is the ability to tell the narrative in a compelling way to your team, to other people of your company, and to the people who are your customers and your client base. Because by shaping the narrative, we shape our destiny, we shape our future, we re-express and change the DNA of an organization. But there's a second thing also that is often a road bump. It's something that you would be expected to be concerned about, and that's doubt. Just like the night before March the Penguins opened, we doubted that it would ever work because we just didn't know. We come to days like this where we're all together. It's an extraordinary group. I had the opportunity to meet many of you outside, and I was moved and touched and honored to see the level of enthusiasm and joy and level of intelligence and commitment of everybody in this company whom I had the chance to meet. We come together, we feel energized, we get pumped up, we come to places like this, and then we go back. We have to re-enter into those same offices, those same cubicles, the same desks, the same worksheets, the same emails that we haven't gotten to. And we doubt that we can ever really hold the vision. So the challenge is not only piercing through the silos, but holding the vision, and holding the vision long enough and in a sustained way, persistently, to strive for excellence so that vision can sustain. And so what you see past the horizon, what you visualized past the horizon, can actually be realized, can actually come to you. Again, you do that with story. And part of story is acknowledging that you have doubts, acknowledging our vulnerability, how scary it is, how uncertain the future is. But here's what we always know. We know that everybody who has a big idea, that every company that seeks gigantic change, that really seeks to grow and to have significant impact on a space, to serve clients with extraordinary value, we know that every company and group that seeks to do that doesn't always succeed. We also know this, that everyone that does succeed sets the goal of succeeding and tells the story over and over again about how they will get there. It is a prerequisite, just like it was a prerequisite for Alfonso Cuarón to sit in the room with the Warner Brothers executives and to tell them the story of gravity again, to have them move out of their box, to change, to break their business model. The fact that we can see a possibility and then doubt it is part of our human nature. I've done a lot of study of comparative religion, and I've always been moved by the fact that in every religion I've encountered, there is a story about doubt, about someone who came up and saw the divine, that walked with a holy person, that saw the miracles, and then later doubted that they exist. So if you came up in the Hindu religion, that person is Arjuna. And if you came up in the Christian religion, that person was Peter, who denied. If you came up in the Jewish religion, that person was David, who said, my God, why have you forsaken me? And if you came up in Islam, then that person was the Prophet Muhammad himself, who saw the miracles. And it was so strange to him, it so broke him out of his reality box that he went and contemplated suicide until his uncle, who had also had his own experience of the sacred, came to the Prophet Muhammad and said, it is real, be of good cheer. Why does every religion tell this story over and over again? Because we need models of those stories too. We need models of the fact that we doubt and that we're not going to be sure that we can carry through, but that the vision is real, that what is beyond the horizon can actually be achieved. And it's that possibility that we keep coming back to as we retell our stories and recraft our narratives. So let's go back to the movies one more time. Maybe not in Sundance this time, just in any movie theater. And imagine yourself at the end of the movie, a movie that you're really enjoying. You're in that last 10 minutes as everything's coming together. As you're sitting there in that dark room, surrounded by other people in that dark room, in the common dream space, you have a revelation, which is that everything you're seeing isn't real. It's not just that the actors are speaking lines that somebody else wrote for them and that they're really actors, and that nothing really happens to the top at the end of Inception because there's nothing that happens after it. It's only a movie. You realize that the whole artifact of cinema is an illusion. That what you're seeing are 24 flashes of light per second, surrounded by mainly blackness. Or if you're looking at it on a tablet or a mobile phone, 30 times per second, surrounded by mainly blackness, right? But because of the persistence of vision, which is somehow related to the persistence of excellence, because of the persistence of vision, we string these images together, and it seems like people are moving and talking, and we're in this frame of reality that we can dive into in our dream state for hours at a time. But then you realize it's not even real at that level. Because, well, you think you're seeing me, and I think I'm seeing you. But what we're really experiencing are photons and electrons bouncing all over this room. And they're coming in through the iris of our eyes and triggering little moments on the rods and the cones that force them to express electrons, which then dance like ballet dancers across the neural pathways up into our cerebral cortex, where we reassemble them into a vision of reality so it looks like my arms are here and my legs are here and your heads are above your waist, and it's the way we expect reality to be. but we're assembling everything. And we assemble everything within the great consciousness of our minds, which allows us to shape the narrative of our lives in a way that's powerful, meaningful, coherent, and common. With that understanding, that you shape the reality which you experience, and that the narrative that you tell is one that you may choose to construct and reshape and form again and again in iteration with your fellow team members and with your audience and your colleagues and with the people you serve, you're able to stand firmly at the prow of that boat, sight past the horizon, be outward facing, and sing poetically the story of the future that will come to you.